Okay, well, welcome everybody. My name is Todd Deck, and I am the Community Engagement Services Manager for the Sacramento Public Library. And welcome to Building Confidence in the Kitchen with Leanne Brown. And before we get into the lesson with Leanne, we do have a little bit of housekeeping to share with everybody. If you're having audio related issues, please exit the program and re-enter. I apologize that we were so quiet and maybe some folks thought that they had some audio challenges. If you need closed captioning, click the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen. All participants' microphones and video have been disabled. However, if you do have a question, use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we actually have built out time in the lesson for a few breaks for questions. So we really encourage you to ask away. And this program is being recorded, and we will share it out to the Sacramento Public Library YouTube channel. We will also email a link to it and a survey a few days from now, so you'll be able to view it if you signed up for it online. I do want to let you all know about a few other health resources that the Sacramento Public Library offers. We have a virtual Zumba class on Mondays at 5:30, Zumba Gold class, which is a little bit of a mellower Zumba, at 4 on Wednesdays. We have a Reach and Read yoga program on Thursdays, which is exactly it. You get to practice some yoga and talk about a book. And then we do have quite a few books in our collection on cooking, on budgeting, mindfulness, and we have Leanne Brown's books in our physical collection and also our online collection. And we do have the New York Times cooking available, and then a resource called Craftsy, which has a ton of cooking classes available to you. So I encourage you to check those out. Before we go into the lesson, I do want to amplify the Lunch at the Library experience at the Sacramento Public Library. It's really kind of what led us to being here tonight. Lunch at the Library is a program that the Sacramento Public Library has been part of for many years, and it's really the heart of our summer initiatives. And it's exactly what it says. It's where we provide free lunches to kids throughout the summer. And this year, the California State Library had a component called the Lunch at the Library Innovation Program. And that allowed us to create a partnership with the Sacramento Food Bank and Family Services and Health Education Council. And it allowed us to connect families, teens, and kids to food and nutrition education. And most importantly, it gave us the opportunity to give away free copies of Good and Cheap by Leanne Brown in both English and Spanish. And when I learned that we were doing that, I was like, well, we should reach out to Leanne and see if they'd be interested in, coming here or working with us. And I connected with Leanne, and she was so enthusiastic about this program and the work that we're doing. She agreed to do this, so it's very exciting. One of the photos is of actually the food boxes that we're distributing to kids and families this summer at certain locations, and a lot of the food that are in these boxes are actually food that Leanne will be demonstrating to use today. So it's a really just a nice synergy of a lot of different elements. As I mentioned in the last slide, we do have free copies of Good and Cheap in English and Spanish available. So if you would like a copy and you are in the Sacramento area, please email Katie Ball kball@saclibrary.org with the Sacramento Public Library location that's closest to you. This is a 3-part series. We have on the 19th of July, a week from now, Savory Summer Cobbler. And then on the 26th, we have Creamy Zucchini and Fettuccine. And Leanne has built this lesson plan for us to kind of build our skills on. And it's really going to be a fantastic night for that. So let me stop sharing my screen and give it over to Leanne Brown. Let's see here. Okay. Let me hide my pen. All right, take it away, Leanne.
All right. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm, as Todd said, extremely enthusiastic about this program. I was so thrilled to be asked to be a part of it. It's really amazing to be using the library as a hub for, I think, everything, learning and community. And being a place where you can get some food and learn some stuff in the summer is just like the most perfect thing. And I'm so thrilled to be a part of it. And I'm really excited to be with you all today. So I start all my classes with some deep breaths. And that's for so many reasons. Breathing is probably the most important thing that we do every day. It's what keeps us alive. And it's also something that helps us to come into exactly where we are, which is what we're trying to do today. As we learn, as I show you this recipe, and I'll get into it very soon, we're also working on building our mindfulness. And I think if you're not super familiar with this term, mindfulness, you might have some different associations. You think it's like, okay, it's something to do with meditation. It's quiet, it's slow, it's all of these kinds of things. And it often is many of those things. It's wonderful to meditate. It's one of the most effective ways to develop mindfulness. But mindfulness just means, in a way, it's almost like a different word for focus. It's this practice of focusing in on just now, just exactly what is here in front of us, and bringing all of our beautiful natural awareness to that. And that sounds sort of like, okay, that's very simple. And it is simple, and it's also kind of hard because we live in a culture that is so stimulating, overstimulating, really, meaning that we often end up at this time of day, for me on the East Coast, I'm joining you a few hours later. You guys it's 5:30, it's sort of dinner time. You've had a long day. Most likely you've experienced some stress. And so that's in your mind. And it can be really hard when it comes to getting dinner on the table to let go of all the thoughts of, oh my gosh, the things that happened today, going over it. And then what are the things that I have to do tomorrow? What are the things that I have to do afterwards? What are my kids going to think of this? Am I going to be able to manage this meal? Do I know what I'm doing? Am I going to like it? All of these sort of thoughts become a cacophony in our head. And when so much is going on up there, it's hard to actually feel that we are having a positive experience with cooking because we're not even paying attention to it. We're paying attention to all these other things. And so mindfulness, and in particular, I'm getting back to it, breathing is the most effective tool that we have to bring us back into that. So let's start with some breathing. And because we acknowledge all the stress that most of us are under, let's take a really deep breath, slow. And if you want, we'll do it through the nose and squeeze the glottis, that's the back of the throat, until you hear this sort of ocean-like sound in the back of your throat. When you come to your natural peak, just pause and then let's release. Inhale again, slow. And release. You can even like really make a sound if you're like, we are letting it go. We're letting go of that stress. One more inhale. Pause and exhale. Make it the biggest one. Use your whole body. And feel free to do this throughout. You're not on screen. You don't have to feel embarrassed. I'm the one being embarrassing, although of course I'm not embarrassed. It's so important and so natural for us to breathe and then also just to release our stress so that we can come back into now. Okay, so I hope you all feel a little bit better from that breathing, and I would really recommend just keeping it up, just a mindful breath, meaning a breath that we're paying attention to. And if at any point you're sort of like, what do I do here? You feel like you're not maybe paying attention, or if you're cooking along, I hope you are. If you're not sure what to do, take a deep breath. It's never a bad choice. So let's start. We are going to be making this tomato and tuna spaghetti. And so we're going to be using canned tomatoes, spaghetti. Actually, I have bucatini here because that's what I happen to have. It's a lot like spaghetti, but a little different, garlic, and a can of tuna. And then we're also going to be using a little bit of olive oil and some cheese. I forgot to bring that out, so I'll grab that actually. Here we go. Some Romano cheese, Parmesan, anything really. Of course, this is sort of a classic Italian dish. So we're using Italian cheese, but you could use a different hard cheese if that is what you happen to have around. And the other thing with this recipe, I also want, in addition to mindfulness, I know because we're talking about good and cheap, and I'm sure many of you are here for kind of budgeting and inexpensive meal ideas. This meal is very inexpensive. I hope you'll see it's sort of made with things that we want to have around. And that's one of the really important, besides my number one tip for saving money on food is just to cook at home. That's it. If you cook at home for most of your meals, you are guaranteed basically to start saving money pretty quickly. And you'll begin to figure it out how to do that a little bit more effectively as you learn those sorts of little efficiencies. But so number one is to cook. And then number two is to sort of prioritize the purchase of foods that you can use in multiple meals. So again, everything that we are using here, pasta, we can do so much with pasta. We're going to be making pasta again in a couple of weeks. And it could be any kind, there's just so many things that we can do with that. So it's always going to be a good choice. It's inexpensive and you can use it. It's shelf stable. Awesome. And so things like rice, beans, lentils, all that kind of stuff falls into that category of something that is a staple ingredient that you can keep for a long time, that's inexpensive, that you can store and you can use in so many different ways. Never going to be a bad choice for you. And then canned tomatoes and canned tuna are also very reasonable and can be used so many different ways. So they're going to be wonderful things to keep around. Same with, garlic, garlic, onion. These are vegetables that we can use in so many different things, and they keep for a really nice amount of time. And then a hard cheese like this, we kind of might go like, oh gosh, it's a little expensive. And it may be, you can buy smaller or larger pieces, or there may be some weeks where you go, I'm going to skip the Romano or the Parmesan. I just can't afford it right now. And that's okay, of course. But you'll notice that for this recipe, we're using such a small amount, and it's really for the flavor. And that's the other thing that I so recommend as an overall overarching tip for saving money is to sort of lessen the amount of meat and dairy that we're generally using in our meals. Not to say that we have to give these up. I'm not suggesting we all become vegans or anything like that, but just that they tend to be pretty expensive, especially the last couple of years with inflation going up. Meat and dairy tend to just be rising at a really high rate. And so rather than having to be the center of the meal, like, oh, we've got a pork chop and we've got, our beef, like all of that, we're using them in smaller quantities for flavor. So the tuna, which of course is meat, in this is a smaller proportion. We've got more pasta, we've got more tomatoes and garlic than we have tuna. And then the Parmesan or the Romano is just a really small amount. And yet these flavors are really powerful in this dish. And they're wonderful. You're going to be really satisfied. And so that's enough on the sort of budgeting for now, but I hope that's helpful, and I'll keep sprinkling that in as we go along. And please feel free to ask any questions that you have that's specific. I'd be more than happy to answer it throughout the lesson and in the weeks to come as well. So let's begin with garlic. And I'm talking a lot right now, but I'm also going to try to be a little bit quiet sometimes and just listen to the sounds that we're making. You'll notice this is a really simple recipe. So I might be going kind of slow and focusing in on things to show you how we can be really mindful. Oh, actually, you know what I really want to do? I'm going to get the water on for boiling, because that's probably going to be the thing that takes the longest. So I'm going to show you a tip that I do, which is if you have a kettle for tea, just put it on, fill it up, put it on, and then take this is going to be my pot today. So I'm going to fill this about half full with water. not even half full, like a quarter full, because I'm doing 8 ounces of spaghetti here. I do not need a giant boiling, a huge amount of water here. So we'll keep it reasonable. I'm going to fill about a quarter full, and I'm going to put that on to boil. Listen to the sounds of the water. So we have this water, and I'm going to put that on here to boil. On the highest heat, and I'll cover it. And basically this just slightly speeds up the boiling process. You totally don't have to do it. Of course, you can put it all in there and wait for it to boil. And depending on your stovetop, who knows how long it could take. It could be really quick and easy, but I find that this speeds it up. The other thing I'm going to do is, in my recipe, I say to boil a large pot of heavily salted water. Oh, this is exciting. It has some water on the bottom, so it's spitting a tiny bit. But so what I mean by heavily salted, to be more specific, what I mean is we want to salt the water enough so that actually you can taste that there's salt in there. So it should taste sort of like seawater. And that's something that a lot of us are familiar with, maybe not all of us, but we want to actually be able to taste the salt. So I'm going to take some salt, and I'm going to add quite a bit of salt here. And I'm going to let it come to a boil because it needs to mix in. But before I add the pasta, I'll just taste it to see if it tastes salty enough. And again, if it's not, oh, pardon me. My apologies, I am getting over a summer cold. You can probably hear my voice. It's a little scratchy. All is well, but I do have residual. Oh, anyhow, you're going to want to taste it, have it be salty. And again, there's room for error, truly. This is sort of the ideal when we heavily salt our water like that, so that it tastes like seawater. Our pasta comes out, it's already seasoned, and you just notice a difference. You're like, oh, everything just tastes so nice, because when everything is well salted, the flavors will be fantastic. And because this is so darn simple, tomato, tuna, garlic, and then I've suggested a couple of things that you can throw in. You can absolutely throw in other fresh vegetables. You have some zucchini, some peppers, all kinds of things like that you could throw in here as well. But if we're going to keep it really, really simple, it's just nice to make sure that it's well seasoned. Yeah. So while that is all happening, we are going to mindfully peel some garlic. And the reason it's so effective to practice mindfulness while we're cooking is that there's just so much sensory experience around us. There's the feel of the garlic, truly the way that it's so papery. And so I've sort of smashed these out. I'm actually gonna do 4 cloves tonight because that's what I feel like. I've smashed these out. And now I'm going to chop off just the end of each of them, my knife. And then I'm going to peel this thin papery stuff off of them. And then we can smell the garlic, and we can again feel it now. The texture has changed. This part is a little moist. This part is smooth. And it sounds, I don't know, I understand. I think some people think it's like hokey. It's like, oh, breathing, like this is yoga and like all that stuff. This isn't going to really make me feel better. But you'll notice that it does if you let it. We're all human beings. We are kind of animal body. And when we feel and experience our senses, it makes us feel good. Our senses actually are all here to give us information and to give us a kind of pleasure. And so when we allow ourselves, and of course, food is also here for our pleasure, for our nourishment. So playing with feeling viscerally, being really aware of our food is pleasurable to us. And so if we slow down quietly just to notice it and just slow down our thoughts using our breathing and coming back into it and allowing ourselves to be just, I don't know, like to allow yourself to just be amazed and delighted by garlic. I know it sounds silly, but if you allow it to happen naturally within yourself, it can be tremendously joyful. So I heard my water boiling. So I'm going to add this water in here. Ooh, this is hot. I'm going to use this. All right. Coming back to our garlic. And this is I'm so happy that we chose to do this dish for the first one because it is so simple. This is the only chopping I'm going to do. I'm going to open a couple of cans. I'm going to place the spaghetti into a pot. I'm going to take it out. I'm going to mix it up and I'm going to plate it. That's really all there is to it. And I think another thing I want to address, which fulfills our goals of mindfulness, this kind of slow, appreciative quality, this simplicity, is also that a simple meal like this is always going to be really inexpensive. And simple doesn't mean that you're lacking in pleasure. In fact, I think sometimes it's almost the opposite. And hear me out. It's not that a more complex something can't be really enjoyable sometimes, but we tend to crave simple foods like a grilled cheese sandwich, pizza, like a favorite, if we have like a favorite childhood meal or something that we go back to again and again. Like I love oatmeal in the morning. I love avocado toast. You know, I don't need to have a lot of complicated stuff in order to have a lot of pleasure out of it. And likely neither you, neither does your family, neither do the people that you are feeding. I think we get these messages in our culture that in order to be doing it right, to like be feeding yourself or your family right, you have to be doing these big meals all the time. And you do not. You can keep it so simple. And there's a deep pleasure in that because it allows you to maintain your budget and keep your life a little more simple and manageable. And that is so relieving. It is so pleasurable to feel that alone. And then you can enjoy the process of cooking rather than desperately rushing around for a half hour and feeling exhausted. You can actually quietly go about doing this and still have it take a reasonable amount of time, which is also deeply pleasurable. And then if we're doing these pleasure building activities, this mindfulness practice where we're noticing and appreciating everything that we do at every step of the way, then no matter what the outcome, you know, even if I mess this up somehow, which I think is pretty unlikely because this is very simple and I've made it a few times, but it's possible if it gets messed up, I still have all this pleasure and this experience to remind me that cooking is a good thing and something that I like to have in my life, and even maybe better than, I don't know, something else that we might like I'm at the point in my life, and I do believe this is possible for so many of us, where I'd rather cook than watch TV. You know, I'd rather cook than a lot of things. I know that it's going to be pleasurable for me and give me sort of what I need. And that's something that we learn in our bodies over time through experience. So now I'm going to.
Oh, Leanne, do you think is now a good time to do a couple questions?
Now is a great time.
Okay. So we've got one person wrote in, I have some concerns with canned food due to sodium content. What else can be used to keep the flavor?
Oh gosh. I mean, you can use fresh tomatoes for sure. You can use fresh of absolutely everything. That would be just fine. For the fresh tomatoes, I would just say to cook them longer. Cook the tomatoes for a longer time. Allow them to, just allow them to caramelize a little bit, like maybe 10 minutes or so. I think that would be my suggestion. And then I'm not sure what you'd be using for tuna, but if you have fresh tuna, that's amazing, beautiful. I would just maybe chop it up and sear it to begin, just the small amount, with a little salt and pepper, and then add it into the sauce toward the end. Or you could maybe, actually, you could sear it in one big piece. That'd be beautiful. Slice it up and layer it on top. I mean, up to you. But yeah, absolutely. And if you are concerned about the salt in canned food, I know that a lot of stuff is like, these tomatoes don't have salt added. So that is something, there's a lot of canned products these days that are very, very low salt.
Nice. Then we have another question that says you don't use any herbs in this recipe.
That's right, I do not. However, if you have them, go to town. Oh my goodness, like if you have basil around, that would be the perfect choice, as would flat leaf parsley, and really like going wild with it would be fantastic. This recipe was made for this book for eating well on $4 a day. And so there, I do occasionally use herbs in a few things, but in general, I don't use them in heavy quantities because they cost quite a lot and they don't have a huge amount of caloric value. And so while I absolutely adore using them, and I heartily recommend the use of them, and especially if you can grow them, I mean, it's phenomenal. I don't use them very heavily in the recipes in this book, just for practical reasons.
Okay, some more questions have come in. So one person wrote in about the library food cooking program for families, and we'll include that information in our follow-up email about where we're doing the program, because it's now through early August. So we'll include that in our follow-up email for you. Then another person wrote in, what if you can't take tomatoes as it is a nightshade? Which I do not know.
Oh, you can't eat tomatoes? I would say maybe do a different recipe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for substitutions, and in general, just this is such a darn simple recipe, and I would say it's just going to be a totally different thing. I think I would suggest actually try, we're doing it in a couple weeks, but the creamy zucchini fettuccine might be a really nice choice for you. There's so many sort of things where you can take vegetables and allow their juices to come together, and they'll make a beautiful sauce, but it will be really different. Like this one it's a tomato based thing. So I would say that's not really something you're going to want to substitute. Okay.
And so then I think we got one last question, and then
I'm just tasting my water to see if it's salty enough. It is.
yay. To be fair, I'm the one who asked Leanne about does heavily salted mean? Because I tried.
Yeah, and I think it's great. I think, Todd, you're brave to ask that, because I know that a lot of people actually want to ask questions about simple stuff like that. And I want to answer simple questions like that, but I just can't know, because everyone has this a little bit like, oh, that's an embarrassing question. And I get that it's embarrassing, but I just ask you to be brave and ask the embarrassing question, because probably there are like 50 other people who want to know it too. So you can be that brave person.
All right. Well, one last question for you for this section of it, which is, when do you switch between focusing on the overall recipe and the particular task you are doing? That's a great question.
Oh, what an interesting question. When do you? I love that as like a mindfulness. I've not really thought about that. I guess what I do recommend, which I didn't model this time, because honestly, you guys, though I'm sure you're all wonderful and patient, would probably be bored watching me do what I recommend, which is to read your recipe fully through. before you begin. And so I think that what we want to do, for the most part, if we want to set ourselves up for success with a recipe, is we do want to read the recipe fully through. And I know it's one of those things that a lot of us know is the right thing to do, but for some reason we're often in a rush. We go like, oh, I'll just like keep checking it out. But when you read it fully through, you can have in your mind now a sort of a little road to the final end, and you can kind of have a sense of how to get there. In my most recent book, Good Enough, I actually did this little thing called a TLDR, which is a thing in the tech world. It stands for too long, didn't read. And it's like a really short description of something. And online, it's usually like for an email or something that's really long. It's like, this is the basics of what it is. And I did that for all my recipes in my new book, because I know that that's my own tendency. I have ADHD. And so I do tend to be one of those people who's like, I'm gonna read it through, I'm going to start. And so I really feel for everybody who feels that way. But you are going to set yourself up for success if you read it through, know that what that little road is. And then that allows you the luxury of then focusing on each task in hand and knowing and not having to worry about the future thing. Because if you don't quite know what's going to happen next, that's always going to create that little bit of anxiety, which is what we are wanting to be loosening and letting go. So we set ourselves up basically that way to enjoy this better. I hope that answers your question. I really appreciate that question. So I'm going to take what is about approximately, this is about a 16-ounce package. And so I called for 8 ounces or so. So I'm going to try to get half of this little package here. And I hope some people are cooking along. That would be so lovely. And if not, I hope you are able to do it, give it a try in the future. See how simple it is. So I've got my pastas. There we go. And as we sort of famously know, spaghetti, it's always like, it never quite fits all the way in the thing. So we have to wait for it to loosen up, and then we twist it, and then it can finally get in. I'm sorry, I wish I had an overhead camera. I'll bring the camera over in a little bit. Okay. Now these are in here, and you want to just use your package instructions from your pasta for the amount of time it'll take. And so mine said, oops,
And Leanne, we did get somebody asking how much spaghetti was it again?
8 ounces, which is half of about a standard package. Most are about 16 ounces. $16 ounces, 1 pound, half a pound. So for me, it's going to take 8 to 10 minutes. So I've set the timer for 8 minutes. And I'm thinking that now is a good time to head over to bring my camera over to the stove and start the next. Actually, what I'll first do is open up the cans. And even this can be kind of pleasurable. I love my can opener. I have one of these kind that opens the side, which is just so nice. And then I have this cute little squeezer that reminds me of like a parrot's beak that takes off the top. And then I'm going to do the same with my tuna. And we're just doing a standard size can of tuna in water. You can use oil packed as well if that's what your preference. Good.
Oh, and Leanne, we did get a question from someone asking any other fish that can be used instead.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's not a lot of fish that come in cans. I wouldn't really recommend using salmon. I think it's it would be okay, but kind of odd But I mean, if you're into anchovies or sardines, they would be, or even mackerel would be really nice. You would just want to chop them up whole, but I mean, they're fantastic and they're often used in pasta and paired with tomato in a lot of Italian dishes. So I think that would be lovely. Yeah, any of those sort of fattier small fish would be beautiful in here, but it will of course change the flavor. It will be a lot more salty and sort of powerful. So you might want to lessen the amount of salt overall, or do a little less cheese probably at the end, or just embrace it's going to be a salty dish and serve it maybe with some greens on the side, something that will sort of lighten that up for you. Okay, let's bring ourselves over here. I am going to do this slightly awkward thing. Please bear with me. Okay, wait, this way. Here she is. Hey. I'm over at the stove now. Can you see me? No. There we go. We're good? Okay. Todd, am I good? I'm hoping so.
Leanne, it looks great. We do have some more questions. It's a
I love
chatty
it.
bunch. Are you good? Okay. So one question came in was, when do you use minced garlic versus chopped?
Personally, there's no exact time. It's truly a matter of preference. In this, actually, you absolutely could mince it really small because it's such a simple dish. And we already have fresh tomatoes and sort of squishy tuna. I just like to have the fun, like these nice thin, I'll show you on the camera and I'll show you in a moment in the pan, but I just like to use them like this. These sort of little pieces like that. And just because then I'll toast them up and we'll have a little more texture, but it's totally up to you. If you would prefer to have it in smaller pieces, that would be great as well, actually, because then the flavor is going to be really nicely distributed. I tend to chop my garlic pretty fine because it's such a strong flavor and I want it to be nicely distributed in everything but in general, it's sort of, you think about texture and you make a personal choice. I think I'm definitely not a very precious home cook. I think that what matters is what you like. And I think you as an individual should experiment with what works best for you, what you prefer. There's no absolute rule for things like that. It's always going to be kind of what you most enjoy. And the worst that could happen if you choose to mince it really fine is you'll be like, oh, it sort of got lost and I didn't really love that. Or if you choose to keep it really chunky, you'll be like, whoa, it was some big pieces of garlic. And yet I didn't feel you'll have an experience where you notice something didn't work out the way you like and you can adjust it in the future. And that's how we learn. So I would totally encourage you to learn and not worry maybe too much about doing it exactly right. I'm going to, and I'd love, if there's more questions, we can do that. But
Okay. We've got, how many does this serve calories?
I don't know that. Sorry, I don't know that off the top of my head. I'm going to olive oil to the pan.
Tomato sauce is how many ounces?
Tomato sauce is about a cup. So it's 8 ounces. It's going to be about a third of this can, maybe half. Yeah.
A third of the can. And then crushed or diced or whole tomatoes?
You can use anything. In the recipe, I call for crushed. But you can use whole and chop them up, or crushed and squish them a little bit more, or keep them chunky. Totally fine. The recipe calls for crushed.
Okay, I think that's all for questions for now. So thanks.
I love it. And so now I'm going to bring these over and I'm going to just wait for this to heat up. Just a little bit more, our olive oil. And then we're going to add the garlic. And this is a moment where I haven't been very quiet, partially because I'm trying to express so much to you all. And we have a lot of questions, which is wonderful. But I do recommend, not that we need to be quiet to be mindful, but that there is something about getting a little bit more quiet externally that can mimic the internal quiet that we want to experience. And it allows us to hear things like sizzling. We're going to add this garlic and let it sizzle. And there is something about this that I never get sick of. And I think it's, if you're newer to cooking, there's something really empowering about this sound. It's like, this is real cooking. Like, I'm doing it. This is the sound of garlic cooking. And as we watch these little white, light amount of green in the middle garlic cloves that we've lovingly chopped, they're going to start becoming sort of translucent. And we don't even really need to move this around. And so that's been 8 minutes. And I am going to check the doneness of the pasta. Ooh, hot, hot, hot. And to me, that is, it's perfect. So I'm going to turn off the heat. And I'm just going to place it over here. And I'm going to pour it through a sieve, get rid of the water. Okay, and then I'm going to quickly jump back over here because as you can see, the edges of these garlic are just beginning to brown, which is amazing and exciting. It's like garlic chip, but that's about the amount that we want. The other thing that is happening besides this jumping, sizzling, beautiful experience of literally just garlic in a pan, this is it, but the amount of aroma I'm experiencing is extraordinary, is now we're going to add tomato. And I'm going to be careful. I'm going to turn the heat down a little bit because this is hot. And it's going to sizzle. That's about the amount of tomato that we want. And I'm going to turn the heat back up. Let's give this a few minutes here. And what we can see is the olive oil, you can see it beginning to integrate into the tomato. The olive oil, which has actually been infused with the flavor of garlic. And I know for many people to walk into a room where some garlic has been cooking is like, oh yeah, this is going to be great. There's something so pleasurable about that. And I just want to point out to you so that you can think about this, take this into yourself, take this into your body, that when you're cooking, you get to experience every little part of that. So that's beautiful. We just leave this. It's really that simple. I have my pasta over here. I'm just going to check on it, make sure it's looking okay. I think I had a couple of these pieces of pasta just stick to the pot here, so I'm just grabbing them off. Wonderful. And then I'm going to come over and I'm going to add in the tuna. It was all in there, a little bit undignified. Maybe I only use myself, but makes me laugh a little bit. But so now we'll break it up so that we have some nice little pieces of flaky tuna in every bit of the sauce. And all that flavor of the garlic and the tomato will be here. And I can hear bubbling. And I'll just bring, okay, so we've talked about the senses. but I want to really, so there's this technique, it's called 5-4-3-2-1 technique, and it's was created for basically to help us when we're having panic attacks, or people who've been dealing with a lot of trauma, who are healing and experience a lot of fear. It helps to bring you back into the moment and calm your nervous system down. And what you do is you take each of your senses and you name 5 things, 4 things, 3 things, 2 things, 1 thing. And so we might name 5 things that we can see. And it's a wonderful thing to do while we're cooking to help us to be more mindful and just notice what we're doing. So 5 things that I can see right now would be the tomatoes and the tuna, this pot lid, my toes down below, and the clock. And just as I go through that process, I really have to look. And then let's go with 4 things that I can feel. So I can feel this rubber spatula. I can feel the floor beneath my feet. I can feel the steam. Oh my gosh, can I ever? And I can feel my clothes on my body. And next, let's do 3 things that we can hear. Of course, the first thing that captures my attention is the bubbling, sizzling. And then I have to try a little bit harder, which is actually really relaxing, really calming. And so the next thing that I can hear when I do is my breath inside my head. And then the third thing I can hear is kind of the appliance. I can hear my fridge humming. I can hear sort of the appliances, like those house sounds that we put into the background, but which are always there. And I can already feel, truly, from doing this, my heart rate slowing down, actually, my breath's deepening as I ask myself to really use my senses. It's profoundly calming. And then we're going to do 2 things that we can smell. Oh, and there's so much going on in this, even though it's simple, that it's like I can smell this sauce, but I can particularly smell the garlic. I can smell the tomato and the sweetness of it, the sort of sugary aspect of it. And then to taste, well, I haven't had the chance to taste this, and I haven't really tasted a lot as we've been going on, other than the water, although I do totally recommend that you taste everything as you go. I often will like eat the stuff that I'm chopping up. Maybe we'll have a bit more of that in our next offerings, but I'll taste a little bit of this, see how it's getting on. It's really sweet from the tomatoes. I think I'm going to let it cook a little bit longer, just to allow the flavors to meld together a little bit. It might need a bit more salt, but I'm not going to add it yet because we're going to add the Romano, which I know to be so salty. And that's our 5-4-3-2-1. And I truly feel slightly more relaxed.
Do you have time for some more questions, Leanne?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So questions come up a couple times. Did you drain the tuna?
I did not drain the tuna, and you can, or you can't. In fact, you know what? Looking at this, I probably should have drained the tuna because we're having to boil off a little bit more of the liquid. But at the same time, it's going to boil down into a little bit more flavor from the tuna being in there. But it'll be quicker if you get rid of it. So again, always with, I hope that, you know, it's wonderful. And I'm glad you guys are asking these sorts of questions, but at the same time, it's okay to do it either way. It will still turn out. All the stuff is so darn flexible and so good. And it's really just a matter of putting such simple stuff together, all of which is handy.
Another question was, what type of brand of pots and pans do you
Ooh,
like?
I, I mean, I am a huge fan, and I know it doesn't show up on camera that well, but a cast iron pan, this is just like a classic lodge cast iron pan. You could probably get one from like, you can get them used, so because they last forever. So you should be able to get one for cheap, but you can get a new one as well for a reasonable price. I love cast iron. I use it for everything. It's naturally non-stick if you take care of it. It holds the heat really well. You can take it from the stove top and bake things in the oven with it, which is so awesome. Yeah, it's my absolute favorite. Cast iron is my favorite, or I have the pot that I was using as a ceramic coated cast iron. And then, there's other non-stick things, but that's definitely my go-to. I think it's the most versatile, lasts forever. Yeah.
So a person wrote, I have a comment. I love your kitchen. Looks like mine with everything I need.
Oh, that's what I was
Um,
talking to you.
that's very nice. What type of what did you do with the extra tomatoes?
Well, use them for something else. Personally, I use canned tomatoes so frequently that I never am upset to have like a half a can in the fridge. There's so many recipes in Good and Cheap, which you can get for free that use canned tomatoes. Make another sauce, make another tomato sauce, throw it in a stew, have it in a soup. You could even use it in a smoothie in the morning if you wanted to get wild. But I feel you will be able to use it in time. It will last just fine. Like, so long as just keep the can, keep it covered in the fridge. It should be good for probably like up to 2 weeks. They tend to last pretty well.
What type of oil is good for sauteing?
Oh, well, if you're for something like this, where we're looking for flavor and we're just using a little bit of it, I do like olive oil. But if you're doing sauteing on higher heat, my personal favorite is sunflower oil, if you can get it, but any kind of what we call a neutral cooking oil, which is a very unspecific term, but it's, oh gosh, I'm like out of sunflower oil right now, so you can't see the color, that's funny. But it's very, very light in color, and those usually indicate that the the oil can be at a higher heat level without messing it up, without getting too smoky and stinky and changing the oil's chemistry in a way that is like not so good for our bodies. So using that for higher heat, but I tend to have like a basic olive oil around for things like this, where I'm using like medium heat to begin with, and then we're kind of adding it in, and then we have the flavor of the olive oil in with everything. I think it's great for pastas and sauces like this. But for say sauteing some broccoli on like a really high heat, you're trying to do it in like 2 minutes, like in a wok or something, I would do something like a sunflower oil or a canola oil would be best. So I think
Um,
we're good. I'm just gonna bring the pasta over. And normally, I think because I'm doing this for you all, and it is wonderful, but usually I would have probably had the sauce ready just as the pasta came out. So it will be going in immediately and not sort of being a little stuck together like this. Just because I spent so long like telling you the budget, like talking at the beginning. But normally probably would have the sauce ready basically by the time the pasta had boiled. But it's okay to do it this way, of course, and to take your time. And so all I'm trying to do, and I'm using tongs, and I really, you don't have a pair of tongs, and if you can get them, they're so nice to have. And they're wonderful for cooking something like this, where I'm just wanting to get a little bit of the sauce and the tuna and everything covered. You can see it's sort of all the quantities. Now you can absolutely go nut, like you can add more tomato in if that's what you prefer. I've kind of created this recipe to just be like, look, it's just the right amount to be covering this tomato, this pasta. Everything gets a little bit of it in it. It's not like soupy. And so that's the idea. I'm just going to turn the heat down. I'm going to add the cheese, and then we're going to add some pepper and taste it. Oh, one moment. This is one of my other favorite kitchen tools. This is a microplane. It's just like a little grater that is really, really, really sharp and so nice for grating hard cheeses, and also for grating lemons. So lemon and lime zest. You can zest so wonderfully with this. And that's actually something, you know what, that's something I might do. I'm gonna go off book a little bit. I've been very like, oh, I'm showing you just exactly the recipe today, which is not normally what I do. I usually go way off in order to show you how flexible things can be. But I think we'll leave that a little bit more for next week. Show you a little bit more about all the possibilities. I hope more of you will come, or not more of you, but many of you will come again to our next class, because it's really meant to build on the next. From one to the next, we'll sort of practice this mindfulness thing, and then we'll see what we can learn next time to sort of continue to bring pleasure to ourselves. So that is looking really nice to me. Add some pepper as well. And then I'm going to add some lemon zest. So actually, for anyone who was, to be honest, now that I think about it, like if you wanted, it would be a totally different dish, but it would also be wonderful to make a like garlic, just do more olive oil, more garlic, skip the tomatoes, add the tuna, and a bunch of lemon zest and lemon juice. That would be lovely. It would be very simple, and maybe some parsley or basil if you have it around. That would be a really, really lovely, simple pasta dish. I am zesting the outside of this. And so if you're not familiar with what zesting is, the zest is just the dark yellow outside of the lemon. We don't want to go past, I'm not sure my camera's going to pick this up, but there's where I've zested, it's like lighter yellow, and that's called the pith, and that part is really bitter. What we want to do is just take that first layer, the lemon zest, and that's where all the essential oils of the lemon or the lime or the orange or whatever citrus you're using lives, and it smells absolutely bonkers incredible. It's so wonderful. I was once doing it with this little girl, and she was like, it smells like lemon candy, and it's like, yeah, it does. It's so powerful, and so it's in many situations, it's so much better way to get the flavor of lemon and the aroma in particular of lemon into a dish than actually using lemon juice. And pretty much anytime you use a lemon, if you don't also use the zest, you are missing out. Zest is phenomenal. Zest is life, and tomato and lemon go together really, really well. I know they're both acidic, but they're also somehow so complementary. I hope you'll try it. I am going to mix this around, and I think we're going to call it done. I will taste it quickly just to make sure, but I have a feeling that we're going to be happy with this, that I'm going to be happy with this. I have a spoon, which is kind of awkward. Yeah, I'm just going to use my finger. Oh my God. I forgot how tasty this dish is. Yum. And I'm so happy I added the lemon. Okay, so we're going to take this off the heat. I'm going to grab a bowl. I'm going to bring this camera back over to its spot. How are we doing? Okay. Whoop. There we go. Get my bowl. Oh, I'm so pleased with how this turned out. And I'm so pleased with the experience and all the wonderful questions.
Are you ready for some more questions, Leanne?
Heck yeah. Okay. Here we go. We have pasta over here. Actually, just before we do the next questions, why don't I just plate this up quickly and then we'll do some more questions? Because I just want to just demonstrate this is not unlike probably every other cooking show, whatever, frankly, cooking class you've ever been to that focuses so much on the outcome. I think it's the process that we just did that matters. But we also want to, of course, appreciate what we're doing. We are trying to create a dish here, but no matter what, no matter how happy you are with it, right now you can celebrate it, even if it's not perfect. And I often have that experience, but it's not exactly how I wanted it to be. But you can celebrate that you made this food yourself. You made it with love and great intention. And that's so important. Really, really matters. And so in that moment, if you're having them like, I'm going to beat myself up because it's not as good as I wanted it to be, or like, oh, my kids are going to not like it, or someone else is going to criticize me, I would just really encourage you to take a moment to appreciate yourself for your efforts and to give yourself a break and to understand and think about for a moment, like what's really important. And it's really just that you did it, like your beautiful, beautiful intentions here in making this and all the love that went into it and all of the ways that we can be so grateful for everything in this dish. You know, this is such a simple dish, and yet the pasta, somebody had to think about how many steps there were to make that, get it on the shelf, and for you to buy it, for you to store it, for you to make this. Then there's the tomatoes, the garlic, which was grown from the earth, the cheese that was made by this incredible process, all of this so that you can have this moment. And none of that can be dulled, even if it didn't turn out great. You know, like all of that is still really true. And I think I know it sounds like a little bit hokey again, but gosh, I guess I'm a little bit hokey in some ways, that I get a lot of pleasure out of being this way. It brings me a lot of joy and appreciation in my daily life with the simple things. And that feels good to me. So I just added a little bit of cheese on top, you know, for flair. That's what we do. And I'd be so happy to take some more questions. I'm going to grab a fork.
Okay. So first question is, how do you season cast iron?
Oh, well, so I'm more than happy to tell you my way, but also there's so many different ways. And it's like, you can go down rabbit holes on the internet learning about this. So if you're really interested, I encourage you to kind of like honestly let yourself go down a rabbit hole because it's really interesting. But all that it really needs is quite a lot of fat. So that you can do it, you know, one of the simplest ways is like cook a pack of bacon in it. If you cook a pack of bacon in it, and like all of that bacon fat in it will basically like seep into it and create this layer of protection. And you don't really want to, at least I mean, there's some different schools of thought on this, and some people say you can use soap, but I do not. Just never use soap. The way that you clean it is actually just by using water. And on the stove top, if there's something that's really stuck and you're like, oh my God, how am I going to get this off without water? A, it means it's not quite as seasoned as it should be. That's a good sort of thing to be aware of. And B, what you can do is just put water in the pan, crank it up to high heat, and let the water like boil off the stuff that's stuck on it. And you just like scrape it with a little, like your spatula or something, and it will all come off. And then you can just wipe it out. So the bacon tip is just like, it's a nice way to get a lot of fat, but any kind of oil, and I wouldn't use expensive oil, but add a fair bit of oil, let it get hot, and then clean it out. And basically the oil will seep into the pan, and it will season, it will create this non-stick layer that just like naturally happens. It's a very cool thing. And it just sort of like, it's thirsty, it like drinks it up. There's a kind of art to it that you'll get to know as you do it. You'll notice when it feels like too dry and when it doesn't, when you just need to add more fat into it. I was doing some cooking for a while where I just like I wasn't using a lot of fat for various reasons, and it wasn't really a conscious thing. But I started to notice that my cast iron was like getting so junky because I just wasn't using enough fat anymore. So just be mindful of that and make sure that you use a decent amount of fat. And yeah, it's kind of a good reminder, actually. I know we're not always so kind about fat in our culture. We think it's like, oh, it's not good for us, but fat is so, so good for our whole body. It lubricates us, keeps us flowing and good. It helps our joints, helps our hair, helps our skin, all of that kind of stuff, just like the cast iron pan does as well.
Nice. Okay. Next question is, did you rinse the pasta?
I do like extra, like all I did, I didn't show this, but I just drained it into a sieve. So no, I don't rinse it. There's no
Okay.
need. In fact, in general, for especially something simple like this, you really don't want to rinse it because there's something left. There's the pasta, probably a few of you have heard of using pasta water for, there's a lot of classic Italian dishes that use the pasta water actually as an ingredient, like cacio e pepe, which is just pepper and Parmesan and pasta water, is this beloved dish, and it truly just uses the pasta water. And the pasta water is different than regular water because it has residual bits of the gosh, I'm forgetting the word, but the starches from the pasta left in it. So it when it gets added to the heat in with the pasta, it thickens a little bit, and so it allows for that sort of mouth feel that we like with a pasta sauce. It's like not water like, but is a little thicker than that just feels nice. And so actually, if you don't want to rinse your pasta because you're getting rid of those residual bits that sort of thicken up the sauce and create those nice feelings in the mouth. This is very nerdy level of like cooking obsessiveness, but you ask for it, and I do know and care about these things, but you don't have to if you don't want to. You could totally rinse it, but yeah, that's a step you can skip for sure forever for good culinary reasons, and just because you don't want to. You don't ever have to do that.
Nice. Are you using spaghetti noodles or linguine pasta?
I use bucatini today because that is what I have. I just didn't have spaghetti. So bucatini is like a spaghetti, but it's like a little wider and it has a little hole down the middle. But you could use anything. Like you could use macaroni for all I care.
Okay, let's see your next question. I cooked along with you. My dish is
Yay, thank you.
delicious.
I'm so happy to hear
um,
that.
I love
Isn't
the
it nice? Like
taking.
it's a can of tuna, right? Like I feel like this is something, sorry to interrupt, Todd, but it's exciting and maybe this is my other like levels of excitement and that I developed through caring about simplicity and mindfulness. But it's like, how cool is it that something that we think of as so basic, like a can of tuna, like what do we use that for? Like such simple things, it can really make a beautiful pasta dish. This makes me feel extremely like, oh, I got a secret, like a coupon or something like that. It's like, oh wow. Anyway.
Yeah, I cooked along with you. My dish is delicious. I love the taking a few breaths before starting to cook.
Yeah.
And another person wrote, thank you, looks good, sounds good. Let's see here. What you said while you plated made me tear up. What a
Oh,
beautiful way to look at cooking and food. Thank you.
oh, you're welcome. Honestly, it touches me every time. That's why I share it. And that's why it's a part of my practice, because I think oh, yeah, I'm like getting tingles when I think about it, because I think it's so easy for us. We hear a lot about practicing gratitude and all of this in our culture. And I'm glad, because it's such an important, I think, counterpoint to, again, this other thing that I brought up at the beginning of the class, which is the amount of stress that we are all under, the amount of fear and worry that so many of us are carrying into our everyday lives all the time. And a lot of it is kind of it's like always the fear of not having enough, not having enough of the right stuff that other people have, like comparing with others, which makes us feel like we're not doing well, when in fact we are. or maybe we are doing what's right for us. And I think that the practice of cooking in this way and of taking a moment throughout the process, but especially when we're plating and when we're eating, when we're about to eat, to really be grateful for what is here is so grounding. And it really like connects us to a deep truth that every single one of us shares who gets to eat every day. That it's like, it's such a cool thing about being alive and about being a human being, like that we function in this way where we have to eat every day in order for our bodies to work. And so we have to have this pleasure. We have to sort of commune with nature. When we cook, we express our creativity. We express like our body's ability. Like that's so much of what, where I was doing these simple movements, but when I chop, when I use the tongs, when I even very awkwardly, and thank you for watching me eat, it's kind of goofy, but like when I eat, like I'm using my body in this way and I'm celebrating that. And there's just so much richness in the process of cooking and food that I think we can all actually relate to, and which can be such a good counterpoint, such a good, what's the word? Like, it gives us perspective. That's what I wanted to say. I think it's a really, really helpful perspective to take these kinds of moments to really be grateful. And I mean, in an authentic way, not in a forced sort of like, okay, I'm grateful, but really I'm thinking like, oh, I'm so disappointed that I don't get to eat something else or whatever the case may be, or like you're thinking about all these other things, and that's okay too, but to really like allow a true experience of gratitude to arise in you, I think you'll notice that it does quite naturally if you just let it. But thank you for that. Thank you. I'm glad that it felt good to you.
So next question, Leanne, is can you provide the approximate sodium mg for this recipe? I have to be.
I cannot. This is not, you guys are finding my weak points. I do not have like calories, and I just don't think in that way. For my cooking, I could maybe estimate this because my tomatoes don't have salt. And the tuna is like a low salt. I would say, I don't think it's that much, but it is potentially on the saltier side of what you would make. But I would just, gosh, this is one of those things where if you're someone who is really needing to be careful of your salt intake personally, your doctor told you or somebody, I would say just do be so careful and take their specific advice. But for in general, I would say for just about anyone who doesn't have any specific salt related dietary needs for their body, the amount of salt that we add in a dish that we cook at home is so, it's basically going to be perfect for, like, if we cook at home and we are adding salt to our food and we're mostly eating relatively fresh food, which I know you might go like, oh, canned tuna, canned tomatoes, or it's not totally fresh, but it's like it's like still reasonably fresh, rather than a meal out in a restaurant or a quick meal or a boxed meal. Those do have so much salt added. At a restaurant, it's because they want you to like it, and they add excessive salt in general for that reason. And with packages, it's to help preserve it as well. And so there will be so much in those. But for something like this, and this is, yeah, otherwise it makes me sound like a hippie, but I am, I guess. I really believe that overall, what we taste as the right amount of salt for our bodies is actually the right amount of salt that we need. I think our bodies are so intelligent at telling us what we need to eat when we really listen. I'm a big fan of the intuitive eating movement, all of that stuff. I think that our bodies know. And so if we taste it and it tastes way too salty, then it is way too salty. It's probably not good for us. And if it tastes a little undersalted, we probably need a little bit more salt, and we literally need more salt for our diet. So just in general, I would say don't stress too much about the amount of salt unless it's something that your doctor has told you to watch out for with your home cooking.
So next comment is heating the cast iron pan first before cooking made all the difference for making food.
Totally.
Another comment was, "Oh my gosh!" Exclamation point. This dish turned out delicious! Exclamation point. And so
Yay!
easy and pleasurable to make. Thank you!
Oh,
Exclamation.
I'm so happy. That's so nice to hear. I'm happy for you. It is so nice when it all turns out well, isn't it?
Yeah. Another person wrote, "Thank you, SAC Libraries, for providing this series of Zoom webinars. Thank you for
Mhm.
coming." Um, and then I think we've got one or two more.
Oh, I wanted to say, Todd, I think you mentioned this at the beginning, but I wanted to do a shout out to SAC Libraries for having a cooking implement library. So you can probably get like pans and maybe, I don't know, maybe even microplanes and that kind of stuff at the library.
We have something called the Library of Things, which has a cooking section where if you need like a KitchenAid mixer, other cool stuff, look it up, especially if you're like me, where you cooking is very new to me. So it's a very helpful resource. And then we also have a cake pan library. So if you need to bake a cake, Spider-Man cake or something, we've got it for you.
I like those fancy ones, like the Dutch ones that look like castles and stuff. Do you have those? Like those
Yes.
crazy bunch ones? Ooh, that's
And those were all donated from the public, which is pretty cool. So another comment is, "I cooked along with you. I added parsley and onion that I already had. I haven't thought about cooking with tuna in years, since my backpacking days, and I'm excited to rediscover it. Thanks."
Yay, awesome.
And
Oh, thank you for all this feedback, everybody. I'm so happy that so many of you had a good experience.
um, what's your favorite grounding technique besides 5, 4, 3, 2, 1?
Besides the breathing or the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Going for a walk. For me, honestly, that's for sure. Going for a walk quietly. I think often moving when I'm feeling a lot of, especially anxiety, moving my body, but like not too quick. I'm just feeling the sun on my head. I think all of these are versions of you have to breathe and you have to kind of use your senses. And there's a kind of like healthy movement. Because the other thing that will help you ground and feel, ooh, okay, like you're here now and everything is okay. And you don't have to spin off into all these places is the flow of fluid in your body. Like so often, and like I'm a yoga teacher as well. So I'm also gonna like go on and on about this, hopefully not too much, but we sit at our desks and we sit in these, or we sit at our desk and we sit hunched over and we hold our bodies in these ways. A lot of the time, like if you can see this way that we are at a computer, this is actually the way that we're telling our body that we're in danger. This is like a, oh, protect myself kind of a way of sitting, standing. And we do that all day. We're like giving our body this information that we're like a little bit in danger, that we need to be protected. And so when we go for a walk and we like move ourselves in this more open way, the other thing would just be like moving from side to side or opening your chest up, bringing your arms back. All that will be just so good. And it also opens up the fascia. You want to sit, like touch your toes is another amazing one. We want to open up and allow the flow of fluid like around our hips and just doing movements that we don't do all the time. Moving in a slightly different way will actually bring like fresh fluid into those parts of your body, which means fresh information, which means fresh, the fluid brings hormones into all of those parts of your body, and it will just make you feel that feeling after a yoga class, that like flow, that nice feeling. That's from basically like moisturizing your whole body with like water and hormones. And so the more we can move our bodies just a little bit, it will then, that good movement that happens in our body then moves up into our mind. And of course, our mind is connected with our body and the nervous system is in our entire body. So the more sort of a sense of flow and now we'll feel.
Okay, we're running out of time, but I think we've got two more comments left. One is, "This class makes me smile," with the heart. And then oh, the questions are coming in. Okay. What was the name of the pasta?
Tomato and tuna spaghetti.
Yeah, Tomato and
Simple, simple, simple. We could have called it something else, but especially in this book and in general, I just like to call things kind of what they are. 'Cause
Okay.
it's easier.
I think we've got time for one last question, which is, my cast iron is rusty. Should I get a new one? I have it in my garage, have it in the garage, never used again.
You know, up to you, but I know that they can be salvaged. I don't have like a step-by-step instruction for you, but I think that you can use like oils and wipe, like I know people who are so hardcore and obsessive about their cast irons, and they will clean, like there are people who will like want to clean that up for you. So if you're interested, you could Google like how to like salvage a rusty cast iron, and trust me, you will find so much information about that. You'll be like, wow. So you could do that. Or of course you can get a new one. And if you're wanting, again, if you're wanting to get something for reasonable price, they're very frequently at thrift stores because they last forever. Or you can get them at a garage sale or something like that.
So Leanne, I think we're at closing up time, but I did want to share one last comment from somebody, which is, I don't think I've smiled and grinned this much watching a cooking show before. The mindfulness is amazing. We'll definitely try to incorporate this more into my kitchen.
Oh, I'm so happy for that.
You know,
Well, I hope you'll join us next week too.
next week. So just some housekeeping while we close up. First of all, Leanne, thank you for an amazing evening. I think we all learned just some wonderful things. But for housekeeping, be sure to sign up for the next session of the class, which is a week from today, and then the one after that, which the cobbler one, I'm fascinated. I looked at the ingredients list and I'm like, there's a lot there.
A little more complex, but we're gonna build our confidence.
Exactly. The other thing too is I know that a lot of you have shared that you have made the dish along with us. We would love it if you could snap a photo and at SAC Live on Instagram or at Sacramento Library on Facebook and share that. We'd love to see the work that you're doing. We will be emailing you all a survey about this experience, and I believe Ricardo dropped that in the chat, but we'll be emailing that out as well as a video recording of this webinar. So just thank you all for spending your Wednesday evening with us. It was a really just fantastic night, and thank you, Leanne. You're amazing.
Oh, thank you, and tag me on Instagram too. I'm Leanne E. Brown. I would love to see what you guys made. That make me so happy.
Let's do it. Okay. Have a great night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. See you next week.